Somatic integration is a huge umbrella term which covers a lot of stuff. And ultimately, somatic integration is the most natural thing on the planet. And healing is a paradox. The paradox of healing is you have absolutely no control over it, and yet your participation is vital in order for it to happen. And you're going to understand at the end of this, number one, how is it that we need to participate in order for healing to be most effective? How are we going to interfere with healing and mess it up? Because that's, if you want to be a jerk about it, you're not in control of healing, but you can mess it up. Somatic integration is really how healing happens. Somatic means body. Integration means to combine, to make whole, or to make one. And this is the ultimate goal of healing. We have centers of our brain. We have chemistry in our body that create positive experiences. And when those are lacking, we then by default experience the negative. We cannot chase darkness out of a room because darkness is actually the absence of light. We can turn on the light and then that makes the darkness irrelevant. And it's the same thing in our body. We can turn on the positive experiences of our body, of our brain, and that by default turns down our experiences of the negative. So pain and pleasure are inherently linked. What we know through research is that, as wild as it sounds, neither of them are actually feelings. Pain and pleasure are ways of feeling. They are functions. We can be in a pain functionality, but not necessarily experience a sensation we would call painful. So we need to change our focus and look at, are we functioning? Are we experiencing life through the lens of pain, or are we experiencing life through the lens of pleasure? How our nervous system is integrating, is interpreting what's happening depends on the lens it's looking through. And the lens it's looking through changes how our body functions. I'd like to introduce you to a new term that you will be hearing because it's coming up a lot more in the scientific literature. It's called hedonic resilience. Do you know what's better than having less pain, getting out of pain, and no pain? Having pleasure. Enjoying yourself. This is actually paradoxically the key to not having pain disrupt your life. The hedonic centers of our brain, for most of us, are actually atrophied. They're actually shrunk. Our old training is very strong. As a matter of fact, our bodies today, research has shown, has a 3-to-1 negative bias, which means we are 3 times more likely to interpret life through a negative lens than a positive lens. So what does that mean? We have to be vigilant. Not vigilant for what's all the problems, what's all out there that might be a negative thing. We actually have to be vigilant to constantly savor and pay attention to anything that's good, anything that's pleasing, anything that's enjoyable, anything that makes our body spontaneously go, Now, what that takes is unique for every individual, but we have to see that as important. So we are very aware of the negative, but whenever it comes to truly experiencing the positive, that part of us has actually been muted. And there's a reason for that. So hedonic resilience is the ability to experience enjoyment and pleasure and well-being. And if something knocks you out of that for a time, like getting injured, you are resilient, meaning you can come back to it quickly. Because again, pain is necessary for health and growth. We have to know when something needs to be changed. Don't confuse pleasure with hedonism. Hedonism is just feeling good for the sake of feeling good. That's not what this is about. This is actually feeling good for a purpose. And as a matter of fact, there are two different types of pleasure. Number one is the sensation part of pleasure, which is the opioid and cannabinoid system, okay? But the other one is called the eudaimonic system, which is our dopamine and serotonin system, and this is our meaningful system. If we are not experiencing a positive sensation in a meaningful way, then our body decides, well, you're wasting this, so I'm not going to let you do that very much in the future. So experiencing positive sensation with positive meaning, pleasure and purpose are very, very tied in our system. And the more and more we can link those, the easier and easier it becomes to experience pleasure. So what type of pain is most important for survival? Anybody? Fear. Fear is very, very necessary to keep us alive in the moment. Fear is very necessary to help us to avoid all the negative things that might interfere with our well-being, our health, and our life. However, we cannot avoid our way into a positive sensation. We cannot avoid our way into health. But for the longest time in human history, fear has been so much more important than pleasure that most of us have inherited bodies from the most anal, the most vigilant of our species, because they're the ones that survive the longest to pass down their genes. So most of us have inherited bodies. Most of us are born into culture in which, unbeknownst to us, unconsciously, our bodies value fear functionality and pain functionality over pleasure functionality. So the fear paradox is that fear is necessary for survival. However, it actually inhibits health. It inhibits growth. It inhibits adaptation. When we are in a fear response, again, not feeling afraid, because we don't have to feel afraid to be in fear, but when our body is in fear, it turns down and turns off our digestion, because digesting food is not important if we have to run away from the tiger. Fear is very necessary to keeping us alive. However, having a functional immune system and having a regulated inflammatory cycle is not important if you're running away from tigers. Fear takes all of the resources in the body and says, what do I need to do to make it through this moment? Growth, health, adaptation, those are not important. So those get turned down when our body is functioning in a fear response. The fascinating thing about fear is there are 3 unique fear pathways in our brain for different types of fear. And each one of these different types of fear causes the body to have a different response. So the first one is going to be fear of predator cues. So fear of death, in other words. The next one is going to be aggression. This, in humans, we call fear of failure. Okay? And the most primal one and instinctual one, which bypasses this part of the brain, is the fear of pain. Very, very instinctual fear. So chronic pain, when we are utilizing these fear pathways more than they are beneficial for, that actually changes the function of the brain. The body is trainable. But what are we training it for? Are we allowing the past and the survival needs to train our system so that we are more focused on avoiding the negative? Not only does chronic pain change our brain, but so does chronic pleasure. So in order to develop hedonic resilience, we actually have to prioritize feeling good. Now, feeling good is, again, pleasure is not a sensation. We're not going for a particular feeling. We're trying to get our body into the function of pleasure, seeing life, seeing ourselves through the lens of what's called our reward cascade in our brain. We really want to start looking at our nervous system more through the lens of, does our body say we're safe, or does the body say we're not safe? And this is not a negotiation. You cannot willpower your way into feeling safe. The body says, I'm safe, or it doesn't. End of story. It doesn't care what you think. So when our body is in safety, the two modes of our nervous system, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic, operate very differently than when we're not in safety. If it gets really bad and we stay not in safety for too long, then we'll drop into what's called the dorsal parasympathetic, and that is at best a fawn response, which is how can I distort, how can I fit in so that I'm not seen as a threat, keep my head down, don't stand out, don't be unique. And then at worst, it's actually a shutdown response. Now, this shutdown response is actually designed for when an animal has been caught by a predator and its body is preparing to die. And when its body does that, when it goes into shutdown, it actually releases endorphins. It actually releases pain-numbing chemistry to make us feel good because the body knows it's not going to be able to survive very long. This is where the addiction piece comes in. The vast majority of adults in this society, which we don't have to struggle for survival, are actually addicted to using this stress, not safety side in order to get this shutdown because it numbs our pain. So there's actually two different types of pleasure, which one is the cessation of pain, okay? But the other one is the actual positive or liking sensation. Now, again, this is where pain addiction comes in. Whenever people are limited to only experiencing the pleasure of the cessation of pain, they will go into a lot of pain because that's the only way that they can feel better. To get that relief, you have to first feel it. In my office, we do what's called a neurosomatic evaluation, where we're looking at your nervous system. We're looking at your body to go, where are you holding these fear responses, which are draining you of your ability to enjoy yourself, your body, and your life, that are keeping you in survival mode. And in survival mode, not bad is the best you can get. But you deserve to feel good. Only healthy, happy people are going to be able to come up with the solutions that humanity is going to need to fix the problems now that we don't need survival as much.